The Horicon National Wildlife Refuge is located on the west branch of the Rock River in southeastern Wisconsin and encompasses the northern two-thirds of Horicon Marsh. Horicon Marsh is a shallow peat-filled lake bed gouged out by the Green Bay lobe of the massive Wisconsin glacier Davno, long ago. The glacier, during its advance, created many drumlins, a kind of knoll or hillock in the region, many of which have become the islands of Horicon Marsh. The marsh and surrounding Dodge County have the highest concentration of drumlins in the world. During the glacier's retreat, a moraine was created, forming a natural dam holding back the waters from the melting glacier and forming Glacial Lake Horicon. The Rock River slowly eroded the moraine and the lake drained. As the levels of silt, clay, and peat accumulated in the former lake's basin, the Horicon Marsh was formed. Branches of the Rock River, small and intermittent streams, and groundwater springs provide the water resources for the marsh. At 32,000 acres in size, it is the largest freshwater cattail marsh in the United States. The headwaters of the Rock River, Horicon Marsh, is 14 miles long and 3 to 5 miles wide. The northern two-thirds of Horicon Marsh is managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as the 22,000-acre Horicon National Wildlife Refuge. The southern third of the marsh is managed by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources as Horicon Marsh State Wildlife Area. The Horicon Marsh area has been inhabited by people from soon after the retreat of the ice. Dozens of 1,200-year-old effigy mounds were built by the mound builders in the surrounding low ridges. Later, the region was inhabited by the Potawatomi, primarily to the east of the marsh, and the Ho-Chunk to the west. 7 well-traveled Native American foot trails met at the southern end of the marsh at the present location of Horicon. When Europeans first arrived in the area, they named the marsh the Great Marsh of the Winnebagoes. The first permanent modern settlement along the marsh was the town of Horicon. In 1846, a dam was built to power the town's first sawmill. The dam held the water in the marsh, causing the water level to rise by 9 feet. The marsh was then called Lake Horicon and was at the time perhaps the largest man-made lake in the world. In 1869, the dam was torn down by order of the state Supreme Court, which ruled in favor of landowners whose land was flooded. The area became a marsh once more. In 1883, 2 sportsmen's clubs reported huge flocks of geese in the marsh and that 500,000 ducks hatched annually, and that 30,000 muskrats and mink were trapped in the southern half of the marsh. Both birds and hunters flocked to the area, and the local duck population was devastated. From 1910 to 1914, an attempt was made to drain the marsh and convert it into farmland. Many would-be farmers were lured to North America by the prospect of growing onions in these lands. These attempts failed, however, and many of these immigrants lost everything they had. Afterward, the land was widely considered to be useless. In 1927, the Wisconsin legislature passed the Horicon Marsh Wildlife Refuge bill, providing for state acquisition of the land and the construction of a dam to stabilize the water level of the marsh. In 1940, the federal government acquired the northern 22,000 acres of the marsh. Although the refuge may look pristine and untouched by human hands, staff must actively manage the refuge to benefit a diversity of wildlife for your enjoyment. Biological management activities include aggressive water level management, restoring upland habitat, monitoring waterfowl populations, providing artificial nesting structures, controlling invasive exotic species, and coordinating research studies. Manipulating water depth is the most vital management tool used to benefit waterfowl and shorebirds. Success in establishing and maintaining productive aquatic vegetative communities is often directly related to controlling inflowing and outflowing waters. Various impoundments have been subdivided from the main pool of the marsh using a system of dikes. The impoundments are interconnected via water control structures like stop logs and pump stations. Water depth in these impoundments is managed on seasonal, annual, and multiple year cycles to create wetland plant communities that meet the seasonal needs of wildlife. Moist soil units are established via drawdowns in spring to encourage the growth of plants such as smartweed and millet. When reflooded in the fall, these units attract and provide food for fall migrants. During drawdowns, nutrients are released and the marsh bottom hardens. This drying process results in rejuvenation of the marsh, and when reflooded, it thrives with animal life and aquatic vegetation essential to sustain marsh wildlife. Bank fishing is provided on the refuge daily from 3 designated sites at the ends of Peachy Ledge and Main Dyke roads. Platforms which are accessible to people with disabilities are provided at the ledge and the Main Dyke sites. Current state regulations and seasons apply. Main Dyke Road is open to fishing April 15th to September 15th. Boating and canoeing are not allowed on the refuge, but are allowed on the adjacent Horicon Marsh State Wildlife Area. Fishing is also permitted at the Fond du Lac County wayside on Highway 49 at the Rock River. Please note that all these fishing arrangements are for what are considered to be sport fishing and not for food fishing, such as carp. Horicon Marsh is divided into the Horicon National Wildlife Refuge and the Horicon Marsh State Wildlife Area. The two areas have different regulations and season dates. You are responsible for obtaining and abiding by all current regulations. Waterfowl hunting is not allowed at Horicon Refuge, but is allowed on the state wildlife area. Hunting for deer and small game such as partridge, rabbit, squirrel, and pheasant is allowed on the refuge. Non-toxic shot is required when using a shotgun for small game. Boating, canoeing, all-terrain vehicles, scouting, shining, and baiting are not allowed on the refuge. All hunting on the refuge ends on the last day of the gun deer season. Millions of waterfowl, including over 200,000 Canada geese, migrate through the marsh annually, as do the redhead duck and great blue herons. There are so many fish in this lake: frogs, snakes, turtles, mammals, insects, and plants. Stop. Roll the camera back. Let's look at that last shot again. What do you see? I see beautiful, plump European carp. I see Christmas Eve dinner. Ooh, this scene makes my mouth water. The past few years I've had to do with salted fish instead of fresh carp for Christmas Eve. But guess what the United States Wildlife Refuge officials see? They see an ugly nuisance. They see carp, and they see something to be destroyed. They see a pest brought in by those people from Southern Europe about 100 years ago. The shame is that it was a Balkan socialist named Refuge, a man totally opposed to private enterprise, who led the efforts to nationalize the marsh. Today, the results of that nationalization is that the needs of Balkan settlers are ignored by the federal regime. One can only hope that the present regime in the state of Wisconsin is more sensitive and enlightened about the culture of the descendants of those pesky people from Croatia and from other places in the Balkans who comprise a sizable portion of the population of that state than are the federal officials who seem to abound and flourish everywhere like so many cockroaches. One can only hope that the Wisconsin officials see Badniak feasts for many of their people in their 1/3 of the marsh. Christmas Eve dinner. What sort of person would just throw away Christmas Eve and keep someone else from having it? Scrooge wasn't from the Balkans, did you know? Nor was he from London. Scrooge appears to be from Washington, D.C. Christmas Eve dinner indeed. Scrooge should surely be ashamed. The Office Visitor Center is accessible to people with disabilities and includes exhibits, video viewing, a staffed information counter, bookstore, and a deck with spotting scopes. The Refuge offers many public events and programs throughout the year. Separate on-site and off-site programs and bus tours for organized groups are available by reservation. There are many ways to enjoy wildlife at the Refuge: auto touring, hiking, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, bicycling, bird watching, photography, nature journaling, or participating in educational programs. Public use areas include several hiking trails, a floating boardwalk, an overlook area with spotting scopes, and an auto tour route. Several interior roads also provide access into the Refuge, such as Dyke Road and Ledge Road. The auto tour route and Dyke Road are open year-round, weather conditions permitting. Public use areas are open daily, dawn till dusk. This has been David at the Horicon National Wildlife Refuge in Wisconsin. I hope you've enjoyed your tour with me today.